Welcome, everyone. Welcome to How to Talk to Policymakers with Marj Plumb, hosted by San Francisco Bay Physicians for Social Responsibility. Before we start, I want to inform you that we are recording, and I'd like to invite you once again to post a little bit about yourself in the chat. Also, we want to acknowledge that San Francisco Bay PSR is located on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush and Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco area. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about San Francisco Bay Physicians for Social Responsibility. SF Bay PSR mobilizes health professionals and advocates to promote public policies that support solutions to the intertwined public and environmental health emergencies posed by nuclear weapons and militarism, our accelerating climate crisis, and the deep injustices rooted in structural inequity and racism. To learn more about events, resources, and how you can take action or donate, please visit our website, sign up for our newsletter, events, and action alerts, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. During the event tonight, please post your questions in the chat. Marj will be answering questions during the talk and at the end. And now I'd like to tell you a brief little story before I introduce Marj Plumb. Yesterday, we had a huge environmental justice victory. SB 1137 that passed, SB 117 passed in the California Senate. This is the bill that creates 32-foot setbacks from oil wells as a health protective zone between oil wells and communities, schools, homes, residents. It's a huge victory for all the community groups, frontline community groups who've been fighting for this for decades. So a huge congratulations to them, to the coalition members, to Vision, and also to our supporters. Thank you to all of you who may have called or sent letters and signed letters and tweeted and posted on social media. It was really an amazing day yesterday. We needed 2 more votes in the Senate. And so during the afternoon, we were frantically making phone calls, and we managed to get 2 more votes at the last minute. So huge, such an inspiring example of grassroots organizing. And I think tonight, it makes tonight even all the more special because now we're all fired up and inspired to learn how to do this even more and better from Marj Plumb. So now I'd like to introduce Marj. She is SF Bay PSR's Executive Director. Marj has contributed extensively to the pursuit of social justice by training others in public policy. Marj's training programs have reached thousands of participants, including community advocates, scientists, public health professionals, and clinicians, creating hundreds of new laws and administrative changes in California and throughout the US. Marj, I hand the mic to you.
Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you so much for all of your work getting the word out about the legislation that we were supporting and also the legislation we were trying to stop. So I appreciate all of your work in reaching out to our supporters. We've been doing video check for the last 30 minutes. Did we get it?
I can see your slides, but yes, it seems to be, it looks good. It looks good. It's not, anyway, if anybody is having problems viewing, please feel free to speak up and let us know, because there are some strange technical things happening tonight.
You should be seeing a single slide on your computer. Is that what you're seeing, folks? Bob, can you tell me what you're...
Yeah, I had to take myself off mute. Yeah, we're seeing the title page at this point.
Okay, terrific.
Are you trying to advance it or want to check?
No, I've got it. So
okay, cool.
it's a problem with multiple screens, too many riches.
Okay.
So great, everybody. Thank you so much, Julie. And again, thank you for your work, everybody. Thank you for being on. Let me talk about what we're going to be talking about. Again, want to encourage you to introduce yourself, put in the chat who you are, what you do, why you are here. We love to see new folks into the PSR family. I'm going to do a bit of a recap of the webinar we did 2 weeks ago about how a bill becomes a law. I'm going to talk about communicating with policymakers, and then I'm going to let you go on your business. Please do drop your name and why you're here in the chat. That would be awesome. A little bit about these presentations. First, I'm trying to get rid of a bar here. Great, thanks everybody. This is pretty much a lecture. Policy, this part of the policy process is really kind of, it's information that you need to know. So I'm gonna present the information, and then you're gonna get a copy of the video, you'll get a copy of the slides, and hopefully then you can train others in your organization, and then you can have conversations about, now that you know how a bill becomes a law in California, what can you do about it? What kind of legislation might you want to pass? Parts of this is going to talk as if you're running a bill. There's two reasons for that. One is you should, and two is if you know what's going on behind the scenes, then you can also be a better advocate. When you're asked to, call your legislator or, sign on to a petition, you'll understand what that means. And then third is, I want to be very, very clear, I'm not a proponent of this system as a way of passing policy and making laws. I think the system is secretive, I think it's inaccessible, I think it's archaic. I have had a stance for a very long time that I want to train as many people as possible, as many advocates as possible in how to use the system. And then I believe once we become the experts in it, we will think of new and better ways to be able to pass policy. And, partly I like to think of, the question is, what is public policy? Public policy, we can talk about that it's laws, that it's regulations, that it's, these systems of control or these systems of management. I think of public policy, I don't think we've reached this ideal, but I want us to reach this ideal. I think of public policy as agreements that we make to live together, to live as neighbors, to live in a community, to live in a state, to live in a country, to live on this planet. These are really agreements that our elected officials are making on our behalf. And when we think of them as agreements and as ways of being able to live together, I hope that helps to make the process less fearful, less scary. Another caveat, when I say policymakers, I mean not just the group who votes, the state legislators, I also mean their staff, office staff, committee staff, agency staff. All of the staff in Sacramento are part of what I consider policymakers. When you're talking to one of them, you're as well as talking to a legislator. And then also, of course, the governor. And within the governor's control are the agencies and departments, like the Department of Health Services, Department of Aging, those kind of departments. Those are also part of the policymaker grouping when I say policymaker. So not just talking about legislators. So 2 weeks ago, we did a how does a bill become a law, an hour and a half of really digging down deep into the nitty gritties of how that little bill moves forward. I'm going to give a little bit of a recap on that for those who weren't in that session or haven't seen it, as well as those who have. You can follow along and test your knowledge. So we talked about the process of how a bill gets introduced, Ideas can come from anywhere. Bill drafting is done by the Office of Legislative Counsel, also sometimes just called Leg Counsel. The bill is introduced by an assembly member. The bill would then get an AB, or a senator. The bill would then get an SB. Unlike some other legislatures and unlike the federal government, California legislation starts in one house and then goes to the other house. Normally you don't introduce bills in both houses. There is one caveat, special points for whoever remembers which legislation is introduced in both the Assembly and the Senate at the same time. So I'll give you a few minutes while I go through this. Julie, remember to remind me to answer that question. But for the most part, legislation starts in one house, called the House of Origin, goes to the other house or the opposite house. So you can either start in the Assembly or in the Senate. There's a committee called the Rules Committee that decides which policy committees hear your bill. On the slide, you can see the kind of dates. So you're looking at March for policy committee hearings, Appropriations Committee, which is how much money does your bill cost, and then it goes to the floor. Again, if you started in the Assembly, it goes to the Assembly floor. Started in the Senate, it goes to the Senate floor. When it goes to the other house, does it keep the initial name and number? Yes. So great question. So if your bill starts in either the Assembly or the Senate and it gets an SB or an AB, it keeps that, and then it gets a number. And the number it's given is basically they're sequential. When your bill is introduced, it's given a number, 312. The next bill that's introduced, 313, 314. So yes, you've got a senator introducing a bill. It's going to be SB and a number. When it goes to the other house, it keeps that SB and that number. There are times when legislation changes the number, and that's if shenanigans are going on, and basically, your bill gets gotten amended into another bill, then your number may change. But for the most part, your number stays the same. In the opposite house, same thing. There's a committee called the Rules Committee, decides where your bill goes into which policy committee or committees. Appropriations Committee is money, and then the floor of that opposite house. If there are any changes that were made in the opposite house or the other house, then it has to go back into concurrence, and then it goes to the governor's desk in September. There's a lot of bills on the governor's desk right now that he is either going to sign or veto. So if you want to make your voice heard to the governor, now is the time to do it, because this is his big month. So I've highlighted in darker the areas where advocates engage in the policy process. You are a little involved in bill drafting, just from the perspective of you want to make sure that Leg Counsel drafts your bill correctly, but you're not writing the bill, you're not introducing the bill. Your senator or assembly member, a senator or assembly member is. You're not really involved in the Rules Committee. I've had people ask me, can you lobby the Rules Committee for which committee, which policy committee they send you to? Your legislator may be able to do that, but it's traditionally not a public affair. But all of the rest of the times, this is when advocates make their voices known. So I'm going to talk about especially materials and also speaking to policymakers, so that in those times what materials are due when, and when you speak about your policy idea. So you remember I said all bills start in either the Assembly or the Senate, and then when they go through, then they switch over to the other side, except for there is one bill that's introduced, and it's always introduced in both houses at the exact same time. Anybody remember? No guesses even?
Joint resolution?
No, I believe joint resolutions still start in one and go to the other. The bill I'm thinking of is the budget. So the budget gets introduced in January and it is introduced in both houses at the same time. Both houses work on the budget. And then they come together at the end to iron out any differences. Congressional bills, yes, Jess, those are for California, the only bills that are introduced in each house at the same time are the budget bills. But Congress, you do often have two different bills one in each of the houses. So
And Marge, there's a question that I think this might be a good moment to ask. Patrice would like to know, does,
I answered that.
Oh, did you answer it?
I did, yeah.
I'm multitasking.
That's all right. Yes, it keeps its number.
Okay, great.
Actually, Patrice does have another question on budget.
Great.
So Marge, does the governor, like the budget is introduced from the governor's office to both houses at the same time?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Now it's technically he can't actually introduce a bill, only a legislator can. So the head of the budget committees, the Senate and the Assembly budget committees, they author the budget bills. But it comes from the governor in the when he unveils the budget in January. Yep. Okay, so how to communicate with policymakers. One is, I just want to keep impressing on everybody, the bills that pass, the bills that become law, are the bills where policymakers agree that there is a problem, that there is a solution, and that it's important or okay to solve the problem. That's political will, right? You might have, the best bill in the world since sliced bread, but it's solving a problem no one agrees exists. You're not going to get that bill passed. Or you might have a problem that everyone knows is a problem, but nobody can figure out a solution to it. You're not going to get a bill passed, right? So if you keep thinking as you do your advocacy work, problem, solution, political will, that is going to help you. If you remember nothing else about what I've said, that's going to help you a ton get your bills passed, and it'll help you as well in terms of communicating about bills and writing about bills. So writing for policymakers, there are basically 5 different types of products that you write when you are running a bill or working on a bill, okay? So the first is what's called a policy idea proposal, and I'm going to show you some examples of each of these. That is something that, a lot of folks are, how do you really get a bill introduced? Well, you just write up what's the problem, what's the solution, and why do you think your solution will pass and do good? And you take that to a legislative office and you talk to them about, here's a bill idea. It's actually that simple. So the policy idea proposal is that document that you use. A lot of the offices have their own forms that they like folks to put their ideas on, but it's basically the form I'm going to show you. A policy brief is something where if you've got an idea or a problem that really is complicated, it has a lot of stuff going on, you might want to do a policy brief that's a 2 to 6 page document. You don't often need them. Usually there aren't a whole lot of new problems under the sun. Usually you can find some article or something about your problem to be able to share with the legislature. There's a fact sheet that's specifically for the legislature. There's a floor alert, and that's for when your bill is being heard in either the Assembly or the Senate. People get that confused a lot. It is not an advocacy document. It is a 1-page floor alert. I'm going to show you an example of that. And then I'm going to talk about emails. And I think emails for advocates are the primary tool that we use to communicate. So the policy idea proposal, again, you've got a bill idea. This is what you write up. You tell the legislative offices you're going to be meeting with, what organization's going to sponsor the bills, who else might be involved in working on the bill. Your solution is basically framed, we want which government, we want the state to do what, adopt what solution to solve what problem. That's your bill idea in a nutshell, in one sentence. If it's more complicated than one sentence, you need to keep working on it. You need a very clean, very clear, very easy bill idea sentence. Talk a little bit about the problem, but not too much. This could be a paragraph. Include studies, reports, statistics, and facts, but only kind of bullet point and only as many as you need to be able to really convince the legislative office that your problem really is a serious problem and that there's been studies done on it and that they can rely on those facts. They want to also know whether there's been any prior or similar legislation, and that includes in other states. So you can, you can easily search, we went over that in the last session, for what kind of bill ideas like yours have been tried before. You want to kind of summarize those. And then especially if your bill idea has been tried in other jurisdictions, other states, or maybe a county has tried it, you want to include that information and a little bit about what's happened, why it's been a success. And then financial considerations. If you can't do an absolute fiscal analysis of it or a fiscal estimate, talk about what you think the assumptions of the budget would be. The state would have to hire 5 people, or they'd have to, buy advertising, or, whatever the idea might be that you want to implement. You can kind of start thinking about what the state costs might be. The cost is going to be a huge factor in political will. Even though the state is flush right now, it's not going to be flush every year. And so the legislature does want to be careful not to spend too much money. If your bill idea will cost a lot of money, you might also get pushed to actually go through the budget process. We talked a little bit about the budget process at the last webinar, so you can take a look at the end of the last webinar and determine whether your bill idea should be a bill or you should try to get it into the budget. So policy briefs, again, they may be longer documents, but you want your first page to always be the thing that if it got separated from the rest of the brief would be enough for a staffer or legislator to really be able to read and understand where it is you're going and what it is that you're trying to solve. Fact sheets. Fact sheets look very different in the legislature than advocacy fact sheets. So if you're working on legislation and you're asked to put together a fact sheet, it really, really does look this boring. Over the decades, I have seen folks, spruce it up a little bit, which is great, but essentially you have to have a summary, you have to have a problem statement, you have to have background, and you see down in the lower right side, it says status. That's where you would, every time you pass a committee, you would add in there, pass the, Senate Health Committee, pass this committee, that kind of thing. It's very formulaic, it's very expected, and it literally just looks like this. Not very exciting. Floor alerts, you can get a little fancier. A lot of the floor alerts now have logos of the organizations that are supporting the bill. The floor alert is to be used when your bill is being heard on the Assembly floor or on the Senate. And it is something you go to Sacramento, you hand out in each office, and that is something that says to the people who are voting on the bill that day or the next day, here are the people who are supporting or opposing. You can do I think you can do a floor alert for an opposition bill. I think so. that's and 1 page, not over 2 pages. I'm of the mind that if you've got your logos in there, you don't need to list all of your organizations that are in support. That would give you a little bit more room to maybe say something else that's important. So you can take a look at that and think about that. I also think that folks skim now. And so whatever you've written, if you can go through it, if there are 3 or 4, words that you really want to pop out, that you should go ahead and highlight those words. Let me ask, are financial considerations only governmental, or would info about individual corporate costs be included in there too? Yeah, great question. Absolutely. Bills would be considered, if it's going to impose a cost on another entity, that would be considered, as well as if it's a governmental cost. You betcha. In general, for your written materials, it's really important to spend time with them. One of the things that especially the legislative staff will say over and over again is that they just get so much paper. And we really, really, really need to help them out by not giving them so much paper, and not giving them so much paper that's so hard to read. So don't bring reams in to show that, to hand out to the staffers. You should bring it in because you want to show them you've actually read all these studies, but you don't want to necessarily be handing those out. So make it pretty, easy on the eyes, white space and margins, make sure they're sufficient. The text is broken into sections with identifiable focus. That the headings cue the key points that follow. So be very conscious of what you call that heading and then what's underneath it. And that key points are easy to find. Again, I'm seeing a lot of skimming. So, paragraph with 3 words highlighted. Next paragraph, 3 words highlighted. So that somebody, if they were really just skimming the document, they'd be able to float right down your document and get a good sense of what it is that you are wanting to achieve. This used to be multiple slides, and I tried to condense it into one. We have to talk about language, we have to talk about words. If you don't have a great editor like Julie, you need to find yourself a great editor. You're like trying to reduce, and I love Microsoft Word now. I don't know if other programs do that, where they'll identify especially things like redundancies of words. It's like, circle around, do you mean just around? So you're looking for that. The legislature, what makes it also different than advocacy materials is you don't do a lot of kind of emotional intensifiers in the written word that goes to the legislature. You use that language with your community and with your advocacy work, but the legislature doesn't need really always very extremely severely. The legislature just needs to know, like, what is it that's going to happen. You're again looking at language. Make decision becomes decide, cause a decrease becomes decrease. This is where if you're if you're working with academics, it's really important to be on top of the language, because academics can tend to talk with more words than they need to use. And so, being able to really make sure that that language is really concise, that you're really getting to the point. Again, using fewer words and using simple language. And again, this is where if you're an academic or you're partnering with an academic, duration is actually time. So try to really take a look at your language and making sure you're really editing down. The amount of time that you spend editing your document will be worth it. It is, again, legislative staff, have a real challenge when it comes to documents and when it comes to information. And so, if your document goes through, 10 edit sessions just to make sure that there isn't an extra word hanging out there, it's going to be worth it. You've got more of a chance that it's going to be read. So that's a little bit about the kind of writing that needs to happen around the legislature. Charts and graphs, great question. And graphics, yeah. Simple charts, nothing that needs too much of an explanation. So if the material you're trying to show, shows a clear, this is the increase in deaths by having such and such, awesome, put that in a chart. Graphics can be helpful. It's weird because it's a very staid institution, and so folks are kind of stuffy in a lot of ways. But it's helpful to be able, if the graphic, I would say, if the graphic really powerfully shows what it is you're trying to, get across, then absolutely use a graphic. But not so much for just like it's cute or something like that. Does that make sense? So definitely easy charts that are really clear, and graphics if they really help. Like my graphic here for the next section easily shows person's going to speak now. There was something else I wanted to say about writing. Any other questions about, oh, I remember, English. This is tough. This is also tough in the speaking section. The policy process is a white run dominated process, and it is based on white culture. And so it has very, there's rules and controls and those type of things. Should it be, especially for our communities, should it be more multicultural? Yes, it absolutely should be more multicultural. It's not yet. And so your materials have to be in English. They can be in both if you want, English, Spanish, or English, other language, depending on what your issue is. But it has to be in English in order for it to be able to move through the process. Speaking is also hard around this issue because I've had situations where folks have been have needed interpreters, and the time is the same. You don't get double time because you need to have interpretation. So every community has to decide for itself, and every advocacy group has to decide for itself. Does it want to, is there a point to be made by having a different language used or having some other way of communicating used? And is that point important? I would never say no if somebody has, said, no, we really have to do this in our native language. But you have to understand then what the repercussions of that are, which is unfortunately that it may not be received exactly the way you want it. So those are the kind of, that's what you have to judge for yourself. Jess said, try academia and spoken word. I am perpetually over-explaining and using words that make white people very uncomfortable. Editors are my BFF. That's great, Jeff. Yeah, it's it's just such a strange process. I have to constantly check myself because I teach this that I'm not propping it up by teaching how it works. Excuse me. But, you know, and I've always said this in any of the situations I've been in, you know, you determine for yourself how much of the way the process is structured do you want to buy into, do you want to mimic in order to be heard, and how much do you want to push on the edges of it. So I'll leave that there. Would love to have a discussion about that if anybody wants to jump in. I'm always open to that. So I want to talk about speaking to policymakers, and there's a couple of different pieces I want to make sure to talk about. One is meeting with a policymaker to pitch your bill idea, what we call the informal elevator talk, calling or meeting to lobby a policymaker, email in support or opposition to a bill. I actually include the email in the speaking part because I think that the email is actually written spoken word more than some of the other writing that's used in the policy process. And then testimony at a hearing, which is usually a little longer speaking, but it has the same the same type of process. Y'all, I don't know how many people have been in, you know, speaking training, but it is really all the same. You know, there are three parts to, you know, advocacy, to speaking especially. One is the introduction. You introduce yourself or state your credibility. You make your advocacy statement. I want you to support XYZ bill, or I want you to oppose. Then you have the body of what you're speaking, and you know, depending on your time, if you're doing testimony, you can maybe get away with like 3 claims. This bill will save lives, this bill will save money, those are claims. If you're, you know, in an elevator, you can probably only get away with 1 claim, and then what your support for that claim is, and then your conclusion. Quick review, you know, I've talked to you about, you know, such and such bill, this is what it'll do. Again, I ask for you to vote, you know, yes to that. If the formula works, use the formula, and you can communicate and get your point across in any of the formats of speaking. Oops. I want to talk for a minute about credibility. I love this quote about, you know, we value credibility the most where certainty is impossible and opinions are divided. It is a process, policy is a process of trying to win over votes and trying to win over, you know, policymakers. And in many ways, that is done by, you know, your relationship to them, and whether they consider you credible or not. When we talk about credibility, things are just advancing away. Okay. We talk about it in 3 kind of areas. One is expertise. And expertise can be professional or experiential. So if you're a community member and you're affected by the situation that's going on, that's your expertise, and that's what you get to speak about. If you're studying it, or you're a provider and you're providing care, that's your expertise. Credibility also includes trustworthiness, and there's kind of a couple of ways that that's judged in the policy context. One is being honest. And that means if you're asked a question you don't know the answer to, you don't make up an answer. You say, I don't know the answer to that, but I will go find it and I will get back to you. And then you go and get back to them. That shows that, you know, that you're being trustworthy. Unfortunately, trustworthiness is also about following the rules. It's about, you know, speaking the, you know, if you're doing testimony and you're given 2 minutes, not going 2.5 minutes, not going over. It means being on time. It means dressing the part. And I love the little conversation happening in the chat. I love gotta play the game, but not lose yourself or your ethics in the game. It's a, it's partly what goes to showing that to policymakers that they can trust you. And goodwill. And partly goodwill is about goodwill towards the policymaker, towards the staff. It's about kind of respecting them, but I like to see it more as well about aligning your values. There are certainly issues that we are in opposing sides of, and where you can do the work to really find something you can say that aligns your value with that policymaker. We all believe that kids should grow up without fear of gun violence, like whatever you can do to kind of make that connection that will help to build goodwill in your relationship. So part of the credibility we talked about is expertise. So I'd love for folks to just think about for a moment, maybe jot down a little note for yourself, but I'd love then for you to put it in the chat. Just something you are an expert in, because I am an expert in blank because I blank. Who can play with me here? Type something in for me. You can do it. Oh, awesome, Amy. Thank you. What are you an expert in? Nice, Patrice. This is your work as policy advocates. You have to be able to stand in your own belief of your own expertise. That's lovely. Great, Cindy. Thank you. I love midwives. That's great, Vanessa. Who else? Oh, wow. That's great, Amy. Yeah, you're having to explain things. Oh, that's great, Bob. Yes, you are an expert on nuclear weapons issues. I know. Great. I'm so glad that you're working on that, Mona. Honestly, this is the place for most advocates, is standing in our own truth, our own ability to say what our expertise is. And it's so important in the policy work to be able to say to somebody, oh yeah, no, I can talk to you about X. I'm an expert in that. I've done that for 30 years, or I've, experienced that for, a lifetime. So that's great. The rest of you, if you're still working, great. Yes, Jess, you're one of my heroes. Thank you so much. Yay. So please keep popping that in there, and I just love seeing folks showing up for their expertise. And I am an expert in slideshows because I keep hitting the buttons. So a couple other things about speaking. and this is true as well about writing, but it's really true about speaking because of how we retain information when we hear it. I love this work by this economist around cognitive burden. And it's hard for me because I actually really do like facts and data, can sometimes go overboard in that. But the idea is basically that our system for listening, for thinking, is split between the intuitive side and the rational side. And we often think it's like a 50-50 split, but it's really not. It's really mostly intuitive and instinct, and it's less rational thinking. So when you're speaking, make sure you're looking at things like combining facts with emotional appeals, telling simple stories with a hero and a moral, a moral to the story. These are so important to help, again, the academics, toning down the facts and helping community members in particular be able to really refine and tell their stories. I have a very close friend who runs an abortion storytelling organization, and it's kind of it's a struggle for me because I want people to just be able to tell their story. Just tell your story. But for policy, you need to make sure that people's stories are going to be heard. And so, is there a right way to tell a story? It is a little bit. I mean, it is that that the story is practiced enough, and that it is it is tight enough that someone can follow it. And so I think there needs to be multiple spaces in our advocacy work. I think there needs to be space for us to be able to talk about like what our story is, and let it be ugly, and let it be out there, and let it be whatever it is. And there's a place in policy where we need to tell the story so that it gets to the point, we want them to hear, and that it has it has the moral to the story is what we want it to say. I've been a part of lobby days for decades, and seen, groups of community folks come up, and just, have watched how when sometimes they start talking about their story, that the policymaker just, goes, they're on to the next thing, or they grab the wrong thing about the story. I'll never forget an experience where someone started talking about their difficulty in finding a dentist in their area that took Medi-Cal, and was just talking about how difficult it was and how really horrible it was. And the policymaker then just turned to their staff and said, "Hey, would you help Maria find a dentist that takes Medi-Cal in San Diego?" And it was like, no. The purpose of her story was Medi-Cal should have more dentists in it. It wasn't help Maria find a dentist, right? And so it's really, that piece is just really, really important. Again, aligning values and beliefs. And Biden talked about that today. But it is, I think we have a very split political country right now. And do I believe that by saying to a conservative person that, we all, everybody wants a world free of gun violence, will actually bring that person to my side to want to actually control guns? No, I think we're past that. What it does, however, it makes you look like a better person. It makes you, it goes back to that credibility. It makes you're being generous of spirit. It is a weird thing in politics and in policy But I've seen where somebody has gone after the other side, an advocate has gone after the other side, and the side that's supposed to be with them gets mad and wants to like protect the other policymaker. And you never want to be in that situation, right? So you're always putting that that energy out. I love Robin posted statistics are people with the tears wiped away. That's very sweet, Robin. I may steal that. First webinar, I talked about that there were 3 types of offices that are associated with the legislature. There's a district office that is that's where you go if you need a dentist that takes Medi-Cal. You go to the district office, they'll help you find one. District office is all about constituent services. Capitol office is where the legislator has their office in the Capitol. Those are the different types of staff that are in the Capitol office. And then if that legislator runs a committee, if they're a committee chair, then they have a separate committee office. And that committee office also has a bunch of staff. For the most part, when you're advocating for a bill, you're talking to Capitol offices, not district offices and not the committee offices. If you're developing your bill idea, if your bill is going through a committee, you would talk to the committee office. But if you're advocating, for the most part, you are talking to the Capitol office. The people who you would mostly be engaging with would be the legislative director, and they're overseeing all the legislation that office is looking at, which is every bill that's been introduced. Legislative assistants, and those are issue specific. So if you're working on health, there's a legislative assistant that is working on health. If you're working on the environment, there's a legislative assistant that has environment in their their part of their work. And you'll talk to the receptionist a lot. I've always said, be really nice to the receptionist. Those are really crappy jobs and people treat them really badly. So be nice to the receptionist, and they will be your most helpful friend when you're trying to track somebody down. So there is a hierarchy of contact. And it's important that when you're creating an advocacy campaign, when you're doing advocacy on your own, that you make sure that you understand the hierarchy. So first is who makes the contact. Constituent is the A word. Constituent is the most important member of your community who could be making contact with the legislative office. They will answer your call, they will listen to you, because what is a constituent? Anybody? What's a constituent to a legislator?
A voter.
There you go. A voter and a donor. So when you call up and you say, I'm a constituent, the receptionist's ears are going to perk up. Experts on the issue are also very important. And I thought about not doing 1, 2, 3, 4 because it is also true that people with personal experience of an issue also are higher up in the hierarchy. And then I kept the 1, 2, 3, 4 because I actually still think they like experts. Sometimes they kind of like the personal experience just as a part of what they're hearing from, but not usually. Yeah, so this is my hierarchy. This is what I've seen legislators kind of respond to, and then all others are after that. So if you're being advocating for, calling an office that you're not a constituent of, you're not an expert on the issue, you're not a person who's experienced the issue, but you're calling that office just to say vote for SB3, you're kind of down on the hierarchy in terms of the impact you're going to have. And then the other piece is how the contact is made also has a hierarchy. So it used to be face-to-face was the most important, Now, because of COVID, I'm not sure that's 100% true. So it may be face-to-face and phone call kind of got mixed at this point, because most are going to be phone calls. But the highest level of contact you can make is a phone call discussing with the staff person covering the bill you're calling for. So if you're an expert on setbacks from oil wells, and you're a scientist and you're an expert on that, and you call a legislative office and you talk to the staff person who's covering that bill, that's the highest level of contact you can make, right? That's going to be heard at a different level than others. What we did was we had folks call and basically talk to the receptionist and say, I'm calling about SB, whatever the number was, we want the legislator to vote yes on it. Those get tallied, and then if you look at the other column, right, if you're a constituent and you call and say, please vote yes, that gets tallied higher than if you're not a constituent and you call and say to the receptionist, please tell the legislator to vote yes. They really do keep track. They keep little notes about how many calls they're getting, and who is calling them. Are their constituents calling them? Next would be then email, but one that's personally written, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. Social media tags. I was going to send this to a couple of colleagues in the legislature to see. I think social media tags are probably around 5. Depends on how often they get tagged. I mean, it may even be a little higher. The social media presence of legislators is actually very important to them, because again, it goes to voters and donors. So if they get tagged because you're mad at them that they haven't done something right, I think that does draw their attention. Form letter emails and things like petitions are usually considered very low contact, but unless the petition has overwhelming numbers. So we're talking like, I don't even know, like 50, 60, 70,000 people on a petition. Like you're showing up at their office with boxes and boxes of petitions, or petitions from specific kind of, like if it's, medical providers and you've got 1,000 medical providers that are saying vote yes on that or no on that, then petitions can work. Question, is it so worth it to call if you're not a constituent? Might you be a donor but not a constituent? Yeah, it's a good question. I think most legislators don't think of people not in their district as being potential donors. And it is tricky. I've seen this, someone do this once and they got really yelled at. Don't call the legislative office in Sacramento and say, I'm a donor to this person's campaign and I want you to vote X or Y. It's got to be more stealth than that, apparently. But I think I think if it's a big campaign like what we just did, what PSR just did, and there's a lot of phone calls going to a lot of legislators, especially ones that haven't made up their mind yet, those then I would go up in the hierarchy, even if you're not a constituent, right? If the legislator has already made up their mind and they're voting with you, right? And we keep telling people to call them, and people are calling them who aren't constituents, that would probably irritate them more than help them. So, but if you're trying to get somebody who's uncommitted to vote, then yeah, anybody should be calling that person. Where you could say your expertise or your own personal experience with whatever it was that you're trying to get past, that would increase, the hierarchy of the contact, basically. Email alerts, really like down and dirty and right there. I love this, that it's, the link is right at the top. So especially as you're sending out a lot of emails, you want folks to be able to, just, I've already read this 3 times, give me the link. This goes to a pre-formatted email that would go to your representative, so it literally shows, sets the email up. On those, they usually always, I think always, give you the option of making it personal. Please always make it personal. The offices hate form emails. I don't even think they add them up. So, as best as you can, rewrite the email you've just been given. Please do that. Calling, and we participated in this campaign, it was great. You can go to this website to find your own representative, and enter your street address, city zip. You then click on the rep's link and go to their homepage, find their capital office. So whenever you're part of a phone calling campaign, again, when you call and get the receptionist, you can ask, if you're really just calling to say, please vote no or vote yes, you say, I'm a constituent, I'm an expert, I'm a community member, calling to ask the representatives to vote no on or vote yes on. If you're a constituent, if you have expertise or personal experience, you can always ask the receptionist to speak with the staff member who's managing the bill, that you're interested in talking about. And that'll go to then another person, and somebody who's closer to the bill. They may also, ask you questions. Again, going back to credibility, please don't answer if you don't know the answer. But always be willing to find out the answer to their questions. Jess says, probably answered this, but constituents vote yeah, and vote means a job. A lot of these folks are looking to be career politicians until better opportunity comes along. I love Jess, which this kind of club supports. Yes, so yes, I mean, politicians are politicians, and we have term limits in California, so they may be career politicians looking for other work in the county or in the city. They may be looking for higher office, and they want to make sure that they're doing the work that the people who vote for them and who give them money want them to do. So we have some time. I think I'm probably going to actually go into some of these resources to show you where there is some more information, but so that I don't have to come back, I'll just always end my presentations with never touch the bear. Does anybody on here know what the bear is called? Text it, put it in the chat. What is this bear called? It sits outside the governor's office, and it is called, where is the chat? Is anybody chatting? What's the bear called? The folks on here who've been in my training programs better remember what the bear is called. The grizzly, germ monster, some people. Bacteria bear. Thank you, Mona. This is called bacteria bear. Never touch the bear. So let me come off of screen share and just want to show. Okay. Oops. I'm going to show you my favorite website, because if you know this website and nothing else, you will be very happy. So also feel free, come off mute. Anybody have Any other questions, any other comments about what they have found works for writing or talking to legislators?
Well, Marge, I have a question about the process.
Mhm.
So let's say a legislature says, yes, I like your idea. Then their team writes the bill. Who writes the bill?
Yeah, a place called the Office of Legislative Counsel or Leg Counsel. And so it's literally an office of lawyers. They're broken into the same way every office is broken into. So there's health lawyers, there's environment lawyers, there are education lawyers. And so you take a bill idea to a legislator and they're kind of interested, they will send that, basically they do it through a memo, but email to Leg Counsel and say, would you mock up a bill on this? And then you get back the bill language and you and the legislator take a look at it and see, does this say what I want it to say, right? And then you go back to Leg Counsel. So, an example is, I was part of the team that was running the bill to get the UC and CSU student health centers to provide medication abortion. And the first response from Leg Counsel was, the legislature can't tell the University of California what to do. Because there's this hard, fast rule that the legislature cannot tell the University of California what to do. It's in UC's founding documents. The legislature can't tell them what to do. But we pushed back and said, that's just about like hiring, about what, what courses are offered, how things are taught. That is not about healthcare. The state always tells clinics, medical providers, how to provide healthcare and what healthcare to provide. Like, that is something that the state always has that responsibility. And we won. And so Leg Counsel originally had written the bill so that it was a recommendation of the legislature to UC to carry medication abortion. But because we fought back, they then agreed and they changed it. So, so there's a little give and take with the Leg Counsel sometimes that can be very helpful.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So, Julie, what was the bill we were so excited about?
Oh,
S-
1137, the setbacks from oil
Was it
wells.
SB or AB?
SB.
SB 1137. So Leg Info is the best website in the world. I still want a t-shirt with I love Leg Info on it. Because you get all of this information in one website, which is just amazing. So this also helps you if you're thinking about potentially having legislation introduced. You can research legislation through the bill search mechanism, just putting in keywords, so you can see whether bills have been introduced before that are on similar topics. If you find a bill, like let's say you want to do something like this, or something related to the setbacks, this gives you both what the bill information, the bill language was, and other things which I'll show you. So Legislative Counsel, this is the folks who wrote this bill. So one of the things that they'll do is they'll do a digest, which basically gives kind of the executive summary of the bill. There's also a place in legislation where section 1 is usually the legislature finds and declares all of the following. So you can actually really work with Leg Counsel on this language to make sure that it addresses kind of politically what you want said about your bill idea. And then there's also definitions, and then it will go into the actual bill itself and the bill language itself. But those first sections, especially the declarations and findings, and are really good sections to pay attention to, as well as the bill language, of course. So you can also see what the votes were. So if you're doing something similar that's been done before, you'd want to be able to say to a legislator, what kind of votes it got. Was it close? Was it, majority, that type of thing. History tells you where your bill has been. Bill analysis is a really great tool to be aware of. Every step your bill goes, it's analyzed by somebody. And so whether that's a committee or whether that's the Assembly or the Senate, the floor analysis, the committee analyses are usually fuller than the appropriations analysis or the floor analysis. So if you wanted to take a look at, it's going to drop into my download file here. Oops. Okay, so it downloads. I don't know how I could show that. How can I show that? I'm going to show my screen again. And I'm going to show that screen.
Marge, I can share quick something about like using storytelling as a strategy.
Cool, go for it.
So this is something that, because I work with a lot of survivors of violence who want to do policy work based on their experiences, I found that like starting off, like definitely having a strategy, like framing why you're an expert in the situation kind of first, and then framing how the bill relates to you with points that like apply broadly to the overall population, so that they can be understood as like personal, but also universal to people with like in the same situation or at risk of the problem. And then I would say that like some emotion is definitely received, but you also don't want to ask folks with unprocessed trauma or who like haven't spoken publicly about the issue before, because it'll be like really hard for them to get through it and like stay on task.
Yeah.
And then I would say like closing with like how or what the bill will do to fix the problem is always like a good way to end, like a strong way.
Yeah, great. Yeah. And it's our responsibility as advocates in this process to make sure that folks who are speaking about a personal experience are prepared to do that.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. So this is what one of the bill analyses looks like. So this is written by a staff person for the committee the bill is going through. So it'll have a little bit of the history. It'll talk about the purpose, talks about existing law, and folks can see this, right? Julie, am I showing? Okay. And
Yes,
then
looks good.
okay, and then comments, which it'll include like comments from the author about why the bill is needed. It'll also include more information about other aspects of what the bill addresses. The Legislative Analyst Office, which analyzes legislation for the legislature, also can have its own report in here. And then, so that's the end of that. So when you're doing advocacy and you go into Leg Info, which I'm going to try to get back to. You can download the committee analyses and get a bunch of information about the legislation that you're looking at. And if you're working on legislation that's similar to something that's been done in the past, you can always get those as well. I won't go back into the because I'm risking getting into a screen and never being able to get out. But the other parts of Leg Info, there's committee hearing, the videotapes of committee hearings. If somebody is doing committee testimony, you can watch, live. They have that. There's a daily file, so you can see what the legislature is going to be working on each day. There are pages, there are places for definitions of words, because the legislature often uses a lot of very archaic Old English words. So sometimes folks can get tripped up on, what does it mean to, okay, this is a test. What does it mean to enroll a bill? Anybody remember from 2 weeks ago? What does it mean to enroll a bill? Who remembers? So you just found out, somebody just called, says, that bill we're working on, it's just been enrolled. What does that mean? It means it's gone to the governor. It's passed both houses and it's gone to the governor. Get it ready for signature. That's right. I always say it's been enrolled in the University of the Governor, to try to remind it. So yeah, get it ready for signature. It is right before, when it goes to the governor. And what it means is that the clerks have actually looked at it, made sure that, there isn't a comma missing, there isn't a word wrong, that the bill that goes to the governor's desk is actually the bill that both legislatures have approved. What does it mean to chapter a bill? Chapter a bill. No, not the final copy. It goes into law. That's right, because the law is actually in chapters. So there's a chapter on education, there's a chapter on health. And so when your bill is chaptered, it means that the clerk has literally taken the bill that got signed by the governor and put it into the chapter that it belongs in. So your bill has been chaptered. Julie.
I just want to add two things that I discovered and learned this week that might be helpful. One is you can just watch them voting. You can watch the Senate. And I had it on my computer all day yesterday, watching them vote. Yeah. It was like watching a horse race. I mean, but better because, there are no horses being abused. So that was really thrilling. And two, it's really important to thank the senators and the assembly members who vote for your bill. And I that's something that really was hit home today on our coalition emails, the importance of thanking especially swing voters. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah, very important. I've had the great benefit of getting to know many legislators, and they are human beings. They can sometimes act like jerks and sometimes do the wrong thing, but they actually really do care what people think about them. Most of them do. Some of them are psychotic and don't, but most of them do. Yes, Patrice.
So we watched last night Diablo Canyon go. It was just a nightmare at midnight. But I agree. I never knew you could watch the conversation.
Yeah.
And so if it's something that's horrible, it adds a whole other level of depression to the situation. But anyway, but what I actually wanted to ask you was about the legislative analyses. So, what if you disagree with the analysis?
Yeah, there isn't a whole lot you can do about that. Again, like with ledge counsel in writing up your bill, you can go back and forth and you can kind of share new information for them, to them. But the legislative analyst office they're usually a little bit more kind of protected from lobbying. Now, you can make sure that your author has all of the material you think is important for the legislative analyst office to have. And that can sometimes be helpful. You can even have your author send them, a memo. If you feel like they're going to go in one direction, you want them to understand something else, you can, get your author to send them a memo that kind of explains the position, right? But once they've come out with their, I don't know, other people on the call who do policy work, I don't know that you can really affect it a whole lot when they're wrong or when you think they're wrong.
Well, but I'm really thinking about it as something that's hugely contested in like EPA regulations, which I'm more familiar with, is cost benefit analysis,
Mhm.
because what's included, so I'm just thinking there's like a fiscal analysis somewhere in there, and
Mhm.
how you do that is very contested and
Yes,
meaningful. So that's why I
yeah.
just didn't know if there was a,
You kind of, it comes to, uh, there's a couple of things. One is, any legislator can ask the LAO for an analysis of a bill, of their own bill or of another bill. They are the legislators' attorneys, so that's actually attorney-client privilege. Yeah. So if you have a friendly, let's say you've got an issue and you want to just kind of, see what's going to happen with this analysis, then you can get that kind of quietly first, and then it doesn't go anywhere else, right? Let me see if I can find this. So that's one way to kind of get a right? But the other piece is, I mean, I've seen bills where the LAO has said one thing, oh no, so that was incorrect, Patrice. Ledge counsel is the legislators' lawyers. LAO is totally outside system. That's supposed to be nonpartisan. But again, your author can send them things if that bill is gonna be analyzed. But ledge counsel, you can get kind of their advice on legislation, and that doesn't go anywhere, right? But the legislature doesn't always follow what the LAO says. It doesn't always follow what committees say, I mean, I had a bill once where the state was saying it was gonna cost like $40 billion, and we had estimated that it was gonna be 20 billion, and we won. I mean, we got the bill passed. The legislature believed our estimates. We were wrong. It was a $40 billion program, but um, but a vote is a vote. It's not like the LAO comes out and says, this is gonna be the worst thing and it's gonna cost $5 trillion and you can't approve it, right? They're just saying it's gonna cost $5 trillion. And then the legislature gets to decide, well, do we believe them? Do we think that they estimated it correctly or not? So. Other questions, comments? Okay. Well, just want to thank you all so much. We just threw these two workshops together. We want folks to understand both how policy comes about and what the ins and outs are of it. We hope that that makes you a better advocate. For those of you representing other organizations, please let us know if there's an opportunity to partner with you on legislation or on policy work. We hope that you join in our efforts to support policy in the future. And you'll be hearing from us about different things that you can weigh in on. We wish you, thank you so much for being a part of this. Julie, do you want to say goodbyes?
Sure. Thank you so much, Marge. I've learned an enormous amount, and it was particularly important this week with the Senate voting on all these California issues. And thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope you will stay in touch. We have our gala coming up on September 21st. You are all invited, and you can find more information on our website. We have affordable prices for students and community members. So we really hope to see all of you. On the 21st, Arsenio Mataka, who is a senior advisor for the Biden administration, will be speaking on climate, health, and equity. So thank you again, and hope to see all of you soon.
If anybody wants to hang on, I think Bob wants to say something.
Oh, sorry, Bob.
I just wanted to thank you so much, Marge. Like Julie and others, this, your training has come at a time where you have immediate reinforcement of reality and how things work, including when things are completely, you can't plan, in the
Yeah.
sense of politics intervening at the very end,
Yeah,
as happened after midnight last night with Newsom
Yeah.
and Diablo.
yeah.
So
I'm quite shocked at the Diablo Canyon the vote being so lopsided. It's been a long time since I've seen that lopsided of a vote for something so consequential. But
well, I didn't want to keep things going, but it was blatant at the sense of people saying, you don't want this we need to keep the lights on in California.
right,
And last time a governor didn't keep the lights on in California was 2002, and raising the specter of, the governor at that time, Gray Davis,
yeah,
being, so this in the midst of somebody potentially running for president, all these sorts of issues came to the fore and unfortunately color our political system.
yeah,
Beyond all the good work that people in this room are doing and you've been doing. So
Yeah.
we just have to get ready for the next go round.
yeah, yeah,
So thank you, because it's
Absolutely.
good preparation
yeah.
for all of
You're
that.
welcome. You're welcome. Thank you, everybody. I don't know where Serena is in her doubles match, but I'm gonna go check it out. And thank you for taking time with us. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Night, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.